I'm Marlene Vogelsang, and on behalf of the Lefty O'Doul chapter, I am delighted that you all have joined us this morning. Uh, Tony Oliver from Sacramento is with us, and I saw Steve Treader, who's the co-chair of the Lefty O'Doul chapter. I think I see some of the other Dusty Baker
Oh, maybe I didn't sign
board.
in.
If you want to introduce those folks, Tony, and welcome to everyone. We've invited a couple of other chapters, so we're delighted to see folks here.
Where's
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome, awesome. Yeah, as Marlene mentioned, we're trying something a little bit different. A few of us are meeting at a restaurant, so I got a monitor up on top and I got my computer here. But welcome everybody. We we actually invited our fellow chapters in the Pacific area, so Seattle and LA and San Diego, et cetera, et cetera. So glad to see a handful of names. As Marlene mentioned, we have a double header today. Starting off will be Jane Leavy talking about her
Levy?
Levy, sorry, Levy. And then Ed Edmonds, who is one of the co-authors of a book on lawyers in the Hall of Fame. Before we start, I want to say two things. The first one is, if you ever get a message from anyone in SABR or pretending to be somebody in SABR asking for money, it is fake. It is spam. It is unfortunately something that has happened quite a lot. It uses a very jovial tone, such as, hey, Steve, it's Tony from Baker-Sacramento, or hey, Bill, it's Marlene from SABR San Francisco. It is something that the national chapter is aware of. It is fake. We would never ask for money like that. The claim that they say, is, we have the shortfall. Can you please wire me money? Okay. The only time SABR would ask money from you folks is during the membership period, right? When you sign up for membership. Okay. If you ever get one of those, please don't act. You can send it to me. You can send it to Jacob over at the national chapter. Okay. The second thing that I want to point out is we're doing something slightly different today, and that is we had about 50 registrants. For those who are actually attending the meeting, and we'll capture all the notes on who is here, we are going to be having a door prize. We are going to select one lucky winner who will receive a copy of Jane's book and one lucky winner who will receive a copy of Ed's book. No purchase necessary. You just need to be in the meeting, which all of you are. Okay. And with that, I'll pass it back to Marlene.
Thanks. I'm excited about today's meeting. I'm also excited about baseball right now, and I'm just so delighted to invite you to have you with us today, Jane. I kept calling your name last night every time JP Richards was at bat. I kept
JP, yeah.
drive line. So, I think everyone knows Jane. She's the author of several best-selling books about Babe Ruth, about Mickey Mantle, about Sandy Koufax. She's written about baseball for many, many years. She's a true insider. She's got wonderful insights and just a wonderful way of telling stories. So, Jane, thank you so much for spending some time with us before that nor'easter comes up your way. And I'll turn it over to you to get started. Oh, and folks, would you please put yourselves on mute? And if you have questions, we can put them in the chat and we'll have some Q&A later.
What a lovely introduction. I really, really appreciate it. Today is, I'm going to get rid of this band that's crossing all of you out. Anyway, I'm thrilled that you're all there. My first question to all of you is, where's Dusty? Where's Dusty? Dusty Baker is a big character in the book. In my view, he was and still should be the most human in baseball. And the human in baseball is what we need more of. I'm actually in the midst of writing a piece for the New York Times about the coming of the robo-ump. Just to set the record straight, I am not entirely opposed to it. I think the challenge system is a very reasonable compromise. And just as the pitch clock was necessary, and many of you being SABR people probably know these things, it was already on the books, which they didn't admit because they didn't want everybody to know that they had forgotten to enforce the rule. but it was there already, and it was clearly necessary. So I am not the curmudgeon that somebody described me as being in a recent chat, opposed to all things progressive. Baseball has always changed. It will continue to change. It needs to change. It needs, however, to be guided in change and not allowed to just drift across the Atlantic of God knows how many seasons and decades of baseball without the human element, which is what players talk about in every dugout today, asserting its prerogatives. And that's what really troubles me about modern baseball. We all saw undoubtedly the best example of two of the best examples of human in last couple of days. Clayton Kershaw, the great lefty, being left out on the mound to take a beating. That hurt. I mean, the announcers were saying how much that hurt. He has not spoken about it. He's not complained about it. I don't know if he was pissed at Dave Roberts for doing it or whether he was an old time ball player who said, I'm going to take one for the team. It'd be interesting to know, but it was hard to watch. Worse was the man named Orion, who's not a hunter, but he may need to go hunt for some help in tossing the ball to home plate. The poor guy who was the Phillies reliever, who whose synapses cracked in a moment of extremis, and you can't have anything more human than that. Yes, his catcher was pointing to first base. Yes, he butchered the ball. Again, I'd be interested in knowing, maybe some of you have read it in West Coast newspapers and things that I haven't seen. Was he distracted by the bat, the broken bat? I haven't seen anything about that. Did it have a weird spin because it came off, it was a broken bat, tepid little thing. Either which way, and those are things that'd be interesting to know and write about. The bottom line was his humanity and his fallibility were there for everyone to see. I doubt that the Phillies fans are going to let him forget it. And I doubt that he'll ever forget it. But his teammates wrapped them in him in their arms. They really seem to be a team, where a lot of these teams are not teams these days. And I hope he recovers. I hope he realizes, that it's okay to be fallible, and baseball is a sport in which to aspire to perfection and expect that it's going to happen, that you're going to get precision and accuracy and perfection, none of which are the same. They are different things. In every aspect of the game is impossible. It's a fool's errand. So the question is, how do we balance that human element with the with progress? Progress tells us that progress has to happen and it's necessary. You all know if you build it, they're going to use it. There was no doubt they were going to install the robo-ump next year. Like I said, I'm okay with the challenge system. The challenge for baseball is balancing the prerogatives of entertainment and fairness to the players in those kinds of calls. And in fact, they've been wrestling with it for decades, but without addressing it head on. And I have a problem with that. The last time I heard somebody use the term human element was in a conversation with Rich Hill about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. It was before the Royals brought him up and then discarded him. At age 45, his 14th major league team. And I said, well, how do you feel about the robo-ump? What do you think? And he says, well, at first I was inclined to the full thing, because umpires make mistakes. And I went, well, so do you guys. Remember, it's a game of failure. Why does this one thing have to be perfect or allegedly perfect? I don't even know that it's going to be perfect. which is a separate issue we can talk about. And then he said, well, on second thought, maybe the human element is more important. Well, I had heard that phrase over and over and over, and I couldn't figure out what bugged me about it until I burst out in with some venom, I would have to say. Poor Rich got the full force of it. And I said, we are not the element. We are not something on the periodic table of baseball possibilities. We're in charge. The human beings made this game, play this game, adjudicate this game, and everything else is a subset of us. And that's the way the game was invented. It's the way it's been played. And yes, it has to find a way to coexist with progress, which, asserts its prerogatives all the way along. But I would argue that the entertainment value, and I'll tell you that I've had this conversation with Morgan Sword, who's, as you all know, the executive vice president of baseball ops, which means he's in charge of everything that happens on the field. And, and he said, as we've made it more and more scientific and technical, the latest thing. I frankly miss seeing gnarly catcher fingers, wiggling between their legs. I don't know about you, but I liked that. And I'm not too fond of every time the pitch com fails. Okay, that's progress. Somebody else will figure out another way to steal the signs. They were doing it all during these last games. But okay, so we're going to have pitch com. But Morgan acknowledged, is as it's become more and more technical, it's become less and less of the game that it's always been. And that to me is, and that's in large measure why I wrote this book. Where's where, how much of it has to be human? One MLB guy told me just the other day, you need to give up your old thinking. You have to pretend this was always here, and you didn't have this whole history of, Norman Rockwell style, adjudicators, authorities. I'm pretty sure the last authorities that anybody really listens to, right? I mean, they're gone in the rest of the world. You need to get over that and just assume that this technology has always existed and this is the game that's the way it's always been played. And I went, do I really? Do I really need to do that? If I could do that, I guess I would try. I would try it out. I'm not sure I can. Speaking of the human element, and this is connected to what I'm saying, after I wrote the Babe book, and the Babe book took 8 years. 8 years I spent with this man, more than both of his wives put together. And he almost killed me. I mean, it was brutal. I went looking for another great life to tell about. I couldn't find one. I doubt you could. I mean, who is there that has an element of greatness that is greater than just what he does on the field? Because I'm not really, I mean, I'm interested in what people do on the field, obviously, because it reveals character and it reveals so much of their humanity. But, the Koufax book was about a period in America that he was, came of age in. When America was changing, he was instrumental in the creation of the players union, and he and Drysdale, when they established their two-man strike in 66 and refused to sign unless both of them were made happy and whole by the Dodgers. This was a period of extraordinary change in the country and in baseball. And that was the backdrop to telling the story of Sandy Koufax. I made a mistake there. I said at the end of it, that the other way to look at it was that he was, had he been alive 10 years later and pitching 10 years later, he would have had the first Tommy John surgery, not Tommy John. That is not true. He has corrected me about that. He did not have a torn ACL, excuse me, UCL or ACL. He had a different problem. So, if there's a new edition, I'll correct it. Mantle was my hero. I grew up on Long Island and I lived and died with him. And he touched an operatic um, note in almost all of New York, because every time you went to the ballpark to see, the Yankees, you didn't know what he was going to do or what was going to be done to him, how his body was going to betray him. As you all remember, he was injured from the game three of the 1951 World Series, when human element, a groundskeeper, forgot to put the top on the drain that was embedded in the turf in right center field. That Shakespeare couldn't have written that, right? And he steps into it. And in that instant, his unlimited potential was compromised. And he played 20 years being what he could, as opposed to what he expected and what people expected him to be. The Babe, whew, what can you say about the Babe? Except that and this is, I was able to find stuff about his childhood that so much explained him that other people hadn't been able to get, prior biographers hadn't been able to get, in large measure because, thank you, the digital revolution that has put newspaper clippings online. There's no way Bob Creamer, whose book was, I thought definitive before I started doing my research, could have found the clippings that said in the Baltimore Sun, George H. Ruth disowns his wife. He's taken her to divorce court. Don't let her charge anything at your store, which is, that was in the spring of 1906, and it was all over Baltimore. Everybody knew that Kate Ruth was stooping the bartenders in George's bars in exchange for liquor. That puts a different light on Babe Ruth, the boy who was sent off uh, after his parents divorced in May 1906 to live at St. Mary's school, and where he allowed people to believe the gossip, because it was much easier in 1906 to allow people to say, oh, he was a bad kid, or he was what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. A truant. Yeah, he didn't want to go to school, but he wasn't put there because of any of that. He was put there because his father had no interest in raising him, period. And his father never visited him in all the years that he was at St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys. So anyway, I fully expected I would find another baseball life that could occupy my time and, not bore me, because I take too long. This one took 4 years, and it was supposed to be a year max. Anyway, I couldn't find somebody. Couldn't find him. Now, partly that's because I have two self-imposed rules. One is, if I think somebody has done a subject as well as it's ever gonna be done, and that there's not going to be anything to add. It's just going to be a rehash, or you know, a reaction to, everybody writes that Ty Cobb is a shit. So somebody's going to go write, as Charlie Learson did, oh no, that's really not true. I don't know whether it's true or not. But those are the options that are left to somebody when, when a life has been documented so much as Ty Cobb's was. So I would never dream of doing Joe DiMaggio. Richard Ben Kramer's book is definitive. It's never going to be equaled, period. I also won't do a book on a subject that a friend has done, because whether I think it's good or it's bad, I'm going to have to refer to it, and that's just not ethical. So you take those guys out of the equation, and my agent suggested Mariano Rivera. He would be a good story. I don't speak Spanish. I don't think it's, again, ethical for a biographer to try to write a biography about a living person, right? That you can't speak to in his mother tongue, and that you can't understand the people you would have to go talk to. We've all seen what the translation interviews on the field are like. They are thoroughly inadequate and clearly don't tell you very much at all, which may be the intention. So reporters today, first interview I did for this book back in opening day 2022. Um, Nats Park. I went to see Francisco Lindor and Buck Showalter. I get there, and I've been doing this a long time. There are no players in the locker room. Zero, zilch. They- They're just not there. What there were 7 female reporters. And I thought, wow, progress. This is great. I used to have to do this all by my lonesome. And they were having a conversation. Are there any women here other than the two of us? I'm
Yes,
trying to find
yes, there's
I'm
several.
trying to find a delicate but humorous way to describe it. One of
We
them
have
was
I think we have a handful. I think we have you. I think we have Barbara, Marlene, and Jeanette.
okay. Well,
There,
um,
there might be others if they're
Be
not sharing your
yourself,
name.
Jane.
Yeah.
We'll be okay.
um, so one of the women was very pregnant, and the conversation in the Mets visiting locker room was about vaginal tearing. And I thought, oh, wow, things really have changed. They made me take that out of the book, by the way, um, which I think was wrong. So you can't get near the players, is what I'm trying to say. Access to them is so measured, and so limited. There's no way to really know a person. Sandy gave me permission to speak to all of his teammates and friends and to tell them that it was okay with him and to check with him if they wanted, and they did. Um, and I spent time with him. I just couldn't quote him, right? Mickey, I knew from having covered him for the Washington Post. Um, and the Babe, dead people are much easier to write about. Just way easier. Um, so you can't get to them. And too many writers, I believe, and publishers try to tell stories before the third act. Richard Ben Kramer ran into that when he took on A-Rod. And, Richard died young from lung cancer, which is a tragedy. But that story hadn't completely played out, right? And so people who did try to write about him, and there were some very good people, were stuck without an end to the story. And I have no interest in that. So, what happens to Aaron Judge? Does he end up being the great Yankee who never wins a World Series like, Ted Williams in Boston? We don't know yet. Does he come out of his shell after this shellacking? And take a more vocal, active role in and admit, that he's going to go to Brian Cashman, and if not Hal Steinbrenner, and say, what the fuck? How do you have a $340 million payroll and not have a third baseman? I'm sorry. It's just, I am a Yankee fan, as you all probably know from previous writings on my part. And being a fan is not logical. People castigate me. How can you be a Yankee fan? I'm a Yankee fan because I grew up being a Yankee fan. And that's what happens to people. That's the attachment. So long story short, in 2019, I went to the induction of Mariano Rivera at Cooperstown. I was making a speech, just one of the things there that was going on there about the Babe. And I had breakfast on the veranda of the Otis Saga, which is turned over to Hall of Famers and anybody who has enough, little colored bands around their wrists. And I had breakfast with Joe Torre and Sandy Koufax. Well, I was feeling pretty swell. That was, new for me. And as you probably know, you're not supposed to take notes. You're not supposed to do interviews. And God forbid you should ask her an autograph. I had no pencil. I had no pen. I had my memory. And my synapses were just blown by being there with these two guys and listening to their conversation about what was wrong with modern baseball. I cannot tell you precisely what they said. I didn't write it down. I didn't record it. I was just like, I'm sitting here with, and but it had to do with, I do remember Sandy saying they don't know where the ball's going half the time. And Joe saying something about the way they were pitching, forcing batters to reach across the plate. And uh, that's the best I can do. And neither of them remembered it later when I asked. But at the end of that little pitcher catcher batter colloquy, Joe says, and he was still employed by MLB at that point, hard to watch. And Sandy Koufax said, I don't watch. And I said, that's the story. That's the story I need to tell. I started down that road. Of course, then there was the pandemic and things got a little famished, if any of you know Yiddish. There was nothing to do. I started work on a novel about the year I spent living a nice Jewish girl in a Belgian convent. And I came back to it in the fall of 2021 after baseball resumed. And when the headlines during the postseason were all basically to the effect of baseball's dying, baseball's dead, baseball's breaking, baseball's broken, baseball should be federalized. That was a column that ran on opening day in the Times, New York Times in 2022. As we all remember, Theo was appointed to make baseball fun again. And I quickly realized that when they announced they were doing that, that I wasn't writing the baseball is dead was not an option anymore, given the deadlines and what the changes that were going to obviously occur, and the uncertain nature of, I mean, we knew what they were going to do because they were testing it all over the minor leagues and in Arizona's, summer leagues and stuff. But I had to wait to see what the outcome of those rules were. So I reconfigured, I pivoted, light on my feet. I pivoted and I said, okay, now what I'm going to do instead is go everywhere baseball is played that I can get to, as many of the places as I can, after the new rules are put in, and see how well they work and talk to people about them. And that's what I did. It sort of became Travels with Jane without the dog. My dog Betty is a character in the book. She is the mascot, part-time mascot of the Cape Cod League Orleans Firebirds, which is near my home in Truro, Massachusetts. I'm not there now. I'm in Washington. And that place, have any of you ever been there? Anybody seen that field? It's it's perfect. It's just it's if you close your eyes and you think you can imagine what baseball used to be like, that's it. Um, and uh, and yet, and yet, it's not safe from progress and change either. Um, the NIL has completely upended the way that they can build rosters. This is a league that was probably for a very long time the most prominent summer collegiate league, where they go and they hit with wooden bats for the first time to show people what they can do. For a kid like Chase DeLauder, you might remember that name, who made his debut in this round, the first round of the playoffs for the Guardians, who played there in 2021 and then was drafted 16th by the Guardians and has been injured ever since. The Cape Cod League was what he could do because his parents and his family could not afford Perfect Game or travel ball or club ball or any of the things that are the norm for how baseball is taught and learned these days. And that's another whole subject about which I feel passionately. Um, so little by little, the head coach, because they called coach in college, started telling me about the incursions of the modern game and what they do. And Major League Baseball gives them money to maintain their fields and to put TrackMan up. And they were supposed to have the pitch clock last year, but it didn't work, so they didn't have that. And I was thanking my lucky stars that I didn't have to be looking at the thing counting down. I don't have a problem with it being used. I just don't think we should all have to see it every minute of the day. Just like I don't think we should have to go to New York and see all those people sitting in front of banks of computers trying to decide about a challenge. Um, so I went everywhere I could and talked to. The privilege I had was that I didn't have to talk to idiots. I could pick who I wanted to talk to. And I picked very interesting people with diverse points of view. I went to Driveline, and met Jason Ochart, who is now runs the Boston Red Sox minor league system. He's the guy who's worked with Roman Anthony for the last 3 years. He's the guy, what's the kid, Mayor, what's his name? I'm forgetting. Um, and Kristen, anyway, that's the system he devised for driveline hitters to counteract the system driveline created for pitchers, and is being used all over baseball now. I went to the MIT Sports Analytics Conference, where, among other things, I attended. Thank you, Marcelo, right, and Kristen Campbell. Yes, that's exactly right. Thanks, Adam. Where I attended a very interesting panel discussion on how you make fans today. Well, they had done a lot of research and data searching and scrubbing and thising and thating. And you know what conclusion they came to? How do you make a fan in the modern world? You go to a live event with somebody you love. Did we not all know this already? Okay. There's a lot of that in the analytic world, documenting the obvious. I went to spring training. I went to bananas games. I went to carry North Carolina to the USA uh, training complex, and with Scott Hatterberg, who we all know was patient zero, patient X, he calls himself, for Billy Beane and the A's, because he had this stellar on base percentage, and Billy was and Paul DePodesta were putting forward a new system for how to get players that had value, even though they didn't have that much cost. And Scott is one of the nicest people I know. I adore him. I just adore him. I went to PNC for opening day so I could see the new rules played out on, on an opening day in a major league stadium. And I also probably saw the only sellout at PNC that year. And I went with Janet Marie Smith, who had been busy perfecting what had been left unperfected by the fabulous architects who built that ballpark, because it's gorgeous and it's easy to understand why it's so revered. Though I personally prefer Camden Yards, where I've worked and where I've had a foul ball, fouled back by Brady Anderson in Cal Ripken's 21-31 game that landed, let me just say, between my legs. Okay, so it was supposed to be a fast book. Nah, nothing's fast, because things continued to change. Every time I thought I was done with this book, the number of Tommy John surgeries multiplied by a factor of 3. And new surgeries when techniques were developed. And more people got injured. And the bananas went from being sort of a little nice, charming sideline thing to filling 80,000, people's football stadiums. And more rules got put in and more technology got put in. PitchCom came in 2022, and now we have the robo-umps coming next year. So my conclusion, if anything, about this is it's a plea for humanity in the game. Baseball uniquely precludes perfecting. And it was Joe Torre who said to me, they're trying to make an imperfect game perfect, and I resent it. There is a difference, as I've been educated by Peko Hosoi, who is the woman who she was on the MLB scientific committee evaluating the baseball, whether it was juiced in 17 and 18. She created the sports analytics lab there. They do projects for FIFA and the NBA and women's soccer and like I said, MLB. She's a genius. I call her a humanist with elite math skills, and she's become a buddy as a result of that. But she said, the problem is we have to decide, what are we after? Is it accuracy? Is it precision? Or is it perfection? Because the perfect is not necessarily going to yield the best game. And I can't say it better than that. It's not going to eliminate the pebble on the infield at Griffith Stadium in 2024. It's not going to preclude some rookie pitcher from, is having his synapses snap. It's not going to preclude, I mean, they're the anomalies, the exceptions are the thing we remember about baseball, and they're not all joyous like Willie Mays' catch in 54. It's, Mickey stepping in that hole that was left by the groundskeeper. It's Orion Kerkering, is that how he's pronounced it? Anybody know? Kerkering, I think. Being undressed, in his appearance in this most recent game. I think too many of the changes have compromised the humanity of the game. I'm not saying don't make changes. I'm saying that Major League Baseball needs to sit back, and Morgan Sword knows this. I mean, I could read you a quote from him if I can move my screen a little, as it is in the book. Yeah, I know you're not going to see me for a second. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. Let me get this up here. Da, da, da. This is because this is the piece I'm writing writing for the Times. Variability is baked into umpiring. That's not going away. As long as balls are stitched by human beings and hurled by human beings, it cannot be perfect. What's more, the strike zone that, as conceived by Major League Baseball to go into effect next year, does not match the one in the rule book. I don't know what umpires are going to do. How are they going to suddenly, well, what is 57% of Giancarlo Stanton? They're going to have to be, there's going to have to be changes. My guess about the robo-ump is that, and the challenge is that by, June or so, they'll have worked out the kinks and nobody will be paying attention or arguing about it any more than they did about the pitch clock. And that's fine. Like I said, that's fine with me. But what Morgan said, okay, now I'm going back to that. If I can find it. Oh, I have to press escape. I don't want to do that because I might lose you. He said, I'm going to paraphrase. He said, as we've made the game more clinical and as if we've added more and more layers of technology, we've gotten further and further away from the game that was invented. And after all, we live in an age of perfecting everything.
Hmm.
And that's my problem with it. I don't really find perfection, unless it's human generated. Koufax's perfect game, right? Willie's catch. I don't find perfection that interesting. I don't think it's an attainable goal, and I don't think it's the thing to aspire to. And I think that's what's being wrestled with, not just in baseball, but in our entire age. Pecco Hosoi came out to the Cape League with me and pointed out several important things. One is that the glut of analytics are paralyzing players. They just don't know what to do with all of it. So sometimes they just ignore it all. Well, that's a waste of money since they're investing so much money in it. She said the brain can't handle it. Somebody has to whittle it down. But she also said baseball is a canary in the coal mine. It is showing us every day on a baseball field the consequences of what happens if we allow big data, AI, all the stuff that's, I mean, the things that are determining what ads you see on your screen because you've done a search for a Hyundai 45 years ago or whatever. The things that are happening already and that will continue to happen and determine so much of what's going on can be seen in baseball. It's a harbinger, it's a warning of what we lose if we don't assert our prerogative as human beings to control it. That's the message of the book. And it's funny. And if you like it, please review it on Amazon because those matter a lot. Anyway, questions, everybody?
Thank you, Jane. That was great. We do have questions. And before I forget, I want to say hello to Tara Krieger, who joined us a little bit after we started.
Tara, where are you, darling?
Tara was the person who suggested we get in touch with Jane, so I'm very grateful for that, Tara. And Tara has
Tara,
has a
where are
brand
you?
new baseball fan in her home.
I know, I saw that. I'm so happy for you. Did Tara tell you how we met?
No.
Tara, are you vocal?
Right?
No.
No, you can't hear me?
There you are.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Hey, baby doll.
Hey.
Want to tell them how we met?
Yeah. So, Jane actually was a guest lecturer, I guess you could say, in a class I took in college about women in sports writing like 20 years ago. So,
More.
yeah, it was more than 20
Yeah,
years.
maybe more.
It shows my age too. So yeah. So that's how I guess we met, and you know,
She came up to me afterwards. She was the one person who came up to me afterwards and talked to me about it. And I sort of followed her development as a writer and reporter. She didn't
Right.
know it, but I was. And you know, we talked recently about just how many more women, like, you know, the conversation. Did you hear the thing about the, you know, vaginal tearing conversation in the Mets locker room? It was very interesting. That was my first interview for this book in 2022. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for doing this for me.
Yeah, we all appreciate it. We've got several questions in the chat. What is Pecco's last name? I forget. I remember reading.
I keep fearing that I'm mispronouncing it, and maybe somebody. It's Hosoi. Hosoi, is that the right way to? Is that where the intonation? I think it is.
And what was her title, her role again?
Well, she was a member.
MIT? No.
Yeah, she is a professor. Here, let me get this for you. Uh, Pecco, Annette. Her real first name is Annette. She's called Pecco because her grandmother thought she looked like the little girl on the wrapping of a Japanese candy bar. So, wait a minute, I have to go to search engine. Somebody else want to do that for me? Pecco Hosoi. She's got so many titles, you know, it's like, no, no, no. Okay, I'll look for this while somebody else. She is a professor of engineering and something else. She's she's in a named chair at MIT. She was a co-founder of their sports analytics lab. She was a member of the committee in 2017, 2018, who worked with Alan Nathan. You know, that was when everybody says the ball juiced is the ball juiced. And she was a member of that committee. And she has a very interesting thought about unanimity in balls and whether there should be unanimity of baseballs, which is to say that variability and the ability to adjust to it is what the greatest players can do. So why make the balls uniform? Why, why not just, the more the balls are uniform, the less analytics will work. Um, and, um, and maybe that's not such a bad thing, she says. And this is from an analytics person.
She'd be an interesting guest. Charles is asking if you think speeding up the game is making it unwatchable or that it's unwatchable because they sped up the game. I always thought of baseball as a sanctuary, and now it's less so.
That's a really good question. Are you on the screen, Charles? Do I see you? No? Okay. I've
Yeah,
never,
yes, I'm here to answer your question.
hey, I know you.
Yeah, you do. I saw you 2 days ago.
Yeah, you did. Hey, how are
Yeah,
you?
good.
Great question. Did everybody love last night?
I loved it.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 I liked it better without the runner on second base rule, too.
Oh, yeah. Shoot them. Just shoot them. Get it. I mean, here's what I've never been really sufficiently proactive about social media, which pisses off everybody on my team, editors and things like that. But last night I went on X, which I would otherwise get off if it wasn't for this book, and I will after this book, and said, I don't know about you, I just didn't miss the Ghost Runner.
I hate the ghost
The
runner.
whatever other rules on baseball, it was you always had to earn your way kind of to get on base.
You're quoting me, Charles. That's what it says
Okay,
exactly
sorry.
in my book.
I haven't read your book yet, but I'm going to.
Foundational rule of baseball. You had to earn your way. It's part of what made it so American. And this, oh, let's plop you down on second base and try to get Aaron Judge to choke up and go the other way. What are you, crazy? I mean, it's insane. And it's just, I mean, or Ward Stanton would be even worse. But and it's unnecessary. And here's why. If I know this, they certainly know this. 75% of extra inning games end at the end of 10 innings. So it's a rule that's, made for at most 25% of the extra inning games played. I have the figures for how many end in at the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th. And it's more than 90%. So my proposal when I'm commissioner, even though I totally prefer to let games end the way baseball games are supposed to end, I would be okay with ending it at the 13th inning. Let them go through the batting order one more time and try to have, baseball games end with baseball plays. I understand that the expansion of baseball, which will get even more so, the difficulty in travel these days, getting on a plane is even a chartered one is not fun. Make all sorts of compromises necessary, but they don't need to do it in the 10th inning. Gone.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I've got a couple of questions in chat and then Mars, and I saw another hand. Robert put his question in chat. Adam is asking, given the choices to call balls or strikes between the current method, the challenge method we'll have next year, or full ABS, what do you think would be best for baseball long term?
Well, given how much things have changed, just in the last, I don't know, what, decade, technologically, it's hard. Maybe some of you have an idea what they're working on. I haven't had the time to look into that. Invariably, there will be more technology. And as I said before, technology tells us, use me, that this is the way we have to, live according to technology. I resent that. Like Joe Torre, I resent that. I really, I mean, if I would, first thing I would do as commissioner, other than letting all 10-year-olds in free with a sober adult, is, sit down and have a real conversation about where that balance is going forward between the expedient and what's integral to the game. That I think analytics have compromised so much of what makes made baseball special, and have produced a game that is, yeah, quicker, but everybody has the same ambition for roster construction except for Brian Cashman, who doesn't need third baseman, and for a lineup, all those things that were radical that the analytics posited, they're true. It's easier to score runs, with a home run and a walk. It's absolutely true. It's not a better game. Did anybody hear Alex Rodriguez say the other night? It's the first time I've ever agreed with him about anything. He said home runs are boring. I agree. You don't even look, I don't even look up anymore. What is the point? There are just going to be more of them. You know, the texture and variability of the game is missing.
He's
And
a hypocrite with all the steroids.
yeah, I understand, Mike. I understand. Maybe he's evolved. But I had just finished writing that line is in the book. I thought, oh, maybe he read it. How about that? I- you know, Last night was a perfect game because it was allowed to play out the way it was intended to play out. It didn't, wasn't short-circuited. Um, I was watching pretty carefully. Today, I think it was Rob Thompson said that, it wasn't, everybody was saying it wasn't just the fault of one person, it was the fault of people not hitting in the clutch. But analytics says the clutch doesn't exist. So, you go round and round in circles. The best definition of clutch I've ever heard was Sue Bird at that MIT analytics conference, in which she said players who succeed in the clutch are the players whose performance doesn't decrease, doesn't suffer from those moments of extremis.
Hmm.
I think that's a perfect definition. And I think it does, in that sense, it does exist. I'm sure they can produce numbers to say it doesn't, but did I answer your question? Oh, no, I didn't. I think the challenge system is okay. I think that's a reasonable compromise.
Let me follow that up with Tom's comment. Human element versus technology. One of the most human characteristics is tool making and utilization. Technology is very much part of being human. Analytics StatCast do two things. It shows things that are not seen or obvious, even to people who have played the game at the highest level, and it eliminates the bias. Read your book, excellent read. Thank you, Tom. Robert is saying,
Thank you, Tom.
what are your thoughts on scouting, considering that teams are firing scouts? And then I've got one more question and Mars, and then I want to be mindful of your time. I know you've got work to do, Jane.
Yeah, I have to finish this piece for the Times. What time is it? I don't
And
even know.
we'll read it tomorrow. We'll look forward to it.
Um, no, it's not tomorrow. It's going to be the day before the World Series starts.
Oh, okay, we'll look for it.
Um,
Thoughts about scouting?
when I went with Scott Hatterberg to carry North Carolina for this big U.S. national invitational tournament, which is a big stop for scouts, I was shocked how many there were. Turned to him and said, I thought you had all been fired. And he goes, oh, no, no, no. What they do with the input that the scouts give them, I'm not entirely sure. And the A's certainly are more reliant these days because they don't have the money, that others have to build gigantic baseball ops teams in-house. One of the first things I heard this from Ann Killian at the Chronicle. One of the first things Buster Posey did was get rid of having the baseball ops team downstairs by the clubhouse. Instead, put the old trophies down there. There's a message, right? I think the idea that all scouts are being fired is a little old. I think it was more true some years back. Certainly the Houston Astros were guilty of that. They just, got rid of all of them. Kind of like Donald Trump and the federal government, just boom, gone. But I think, increasingly, things wax and wane. We're not going to go back to vast staffs because, among other things, they've cut so much of the minor leagues. There, I have a bone to pick with Morgan Sword. But I think they're indispensable. And the best way I can describe it, I don't have a copy of my book in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase it badly. No, I'm gonna go get the book. No, somebody else. Does anybody have the book in front of them?
I have the book.
Okay, go to the chapter on Dusty Baker, which is after the second Cape Cod chapter. And it's called Another Way of Seeing. So I said to Dusty,
While I'm looking for that, oh, after the second Cape Cod part,
yeah, then comes the Robo chapter, and then comes Chase the Lauder, then Dusty, then Bregman.
the problem with perfection, he is
That's
the guy.
hmm?
You
No,
remember?
no, it's the one after he's that guy. I said to Dusty,
There are ways of knowing.
yeah, other ways of knowing. So if you go through there a couple of pages in, I say to him, what happened? I'm glitching on the word. What happened to? Oof, you got to find it. I never read my own books after they're done.
I'll tell you what, I'll keep looking for it. We got a couple of
Basically,
questions.
but what I said was, what happened to trusting your eyes in baseball? Empiricism. What happened to empiricism in baseball? And he said, it doesn't fucking exist, Jane. When I get one of those punk ass kids coming down from upstairs, it tells me that my eyes are lying. It's this great quote. What do you mean my eyes are lying? Dusty Baker has been in uniform. And this is before he puts on the Nicaragua uniform for the WBC. Over 7,000 games. You can't tell me. I don't accept that seeing that means nothing. And it's the discounting of that that troubles me so much. And again, it's not, nobody holds it in check. But in fact, I find it a puzzlement that the only kind of science that's not suspect in America today, not just in baseball, is data science, right? I mean, it's like, okay, data science, yes, we go by data science, but forget what people know about immunosuppressants. The negation of the importance of experience and wisdom, and again, not just in baseball, in the rest of the country, is terrifying to me. But maybe that's just because I'm old.
Well, I'm going to let people read the book themselves to find that answer. Let me just really wrap up quick. Mike's asking if you ran any of the teams looking for managers, who would be your top candidates and how can managers matter more? And then Mars will finish up with you. Like I said, Jane, I know you've got work to do and want to be mindful of time.
Okay, the first one is, who's my favorite manager right now?
No, who would be your top candidates for manager right now?
Somebody with a pair of balls. A woman. Somebody who would be willing to say, no. Davy Roberts had nothing to do with the wheel play that won that game, right, the other night for the Dodgers. That was Mookie Betts using his wisdom and his experience to say, let's pull this off, right? Someone who's willing to say, no, I'm not going to abide by the algorithm that says I can't use so-and-so tonight. Joe Madden lost his job largely with the Angels, largely because at one point Perry Manasian sent a message down to the dugout saying that he needed to take Mike Trout out of the lineup. I mean, like, what? You need somebody with an independent streak and a pair of balls, or a woman who has balls without having the balls.
Thank you. Mars, last question. I know your hand has been up for a long time, so I saved you for last.
All right. Well, Jane, thank you. You've brought up a lot of interesting points that have been mulled over, especially by senior citizens. Now, I grew up in Upper Manhattan as a New York Giants baseball fan and went to a lot of weekend games. And my pop took me, went to my first game when I was two in 1949. So I'm out here in San Francisco, still a Giants fan, but pretty frustrated with the team. Here are the points. First thing about the Phillies relief pitcher. Well, the greatest blooper of all was Ralph Branca and Bobby Thompson shot heard around the world.
Branca's
Then
pitch was
some,
not a blooper.
pardon?
Branca's pitch was not a blooper.
Well, I'm just referring to like a euphemism there,
Okay.
not so much whatever you want to call it. Then you had umpire guffaws. Uh, you had Jim Joyce denying Galarraga of a perfect game. So if there
Talked to
were
him yesterday.
replays,
Talked to him
pardon?
yesterday. I talked to him yesterday about it.
Okay, now he admitted he made a mistake, but why wasn't it conferred with other umpires since they didn't have the replay? That was mind-boggling to me, you know. And Jim Leyland, I think, was the manager, and I don't know how much power he had in asking him to confer with other umpires. Another umpire mistake was Deckinger. I think it was the Cards Brewers World Series. But here's some more valid points about baseball. First of all, we have the Sherman Antitrust Act. Why does baseball get a buy on that? That's number one. Okay. Number two, pitching duels. When they were real pitchers duel, the Marischal, Bob Gibson was Spawn rather, 16 inning game. Right.
Yep.
The Carl Hubble Tex Carlton game, where 18 innings, complete games. Right. Why were they able to do it? Right. It's all about training. So what kills me, pardon me, today is the lack of the complete game. A pitcher's duel today is 5 innings, and then it's a bullpen game. They take out pitchers throwing no hitters. They take out, well, Kershaw, I can understand throwing a perfect game because he was coming off an injury and it was the beginning of the season. But Buck Showalter took out pitchers with Baltimore and Arizona throwing no hitters, and Dave Roberts took out a pitcher that the Giants were playing the Dodgers. Once they took out the pitcher and he had a perfect game, the Giants won the game.
Hey,
Look at
Mars,
last night's game.
Mars, this is Tony. We Jane has a hard stop and we have another speaker. Is there a question?
Well, the question is, why does baseball get a bye with the Sherman Antitrust Act?
Okay.
I believe that in recent years, as baseball has aired, there have been trips to Major League Baseball by some important senators saying, if you don't shape up, it may go the way of the dodo bird. It's there for the same reason everything else has been there in baseball. It's been there, I mean, but it points to something important. You're raising something important. It's there because it was defined as an entertainment. And that entertainment quotient, that, like I said at the beginning, the balance between what is fair and what is modern and what is an appropriate intrusion of technology in the game has to be balanced against what's entertaining for the fans. I agree with you 1,000% about the pitching. The change in pitching and starting pitching is the biggest change in the character of the game and the experience of the game by fans. Those duels, whether it was pitcher batter or ace, are they're the fabric that held the sport together. It was not just over a series or a season; it was over decades, and that was going to be diluted by expansion anyway. But as many of you remember, Kershaw and Bumgarner had 11 games in between 2000 and I think 2013, and it was priceless. And those kind of matchups are gone. Those kind of matchups produced friendships, relationships. Um, Jim Joyce rues the day. He doesn't know why he made that wrong call. He tried to have it changed. Was no go. Why? Because there was no precedent for it. The thing about that outcome, and people have argued with me about this, Galarraga knows he pitched a perfect game. What's the difference? That it's not on a plaque in Cooperstown? He knows he pitched a game. They wrote a book together. Nobody's perfect. And
Mhm.
became really close friends. And I'm not saying that that is a better outcome than him having gotten the call right or consulting other umpires or all the other things that were available that are available now, including manager challenges. But isn't that priceless that they're really close friends?
Mhm.
And when you think about, you ask yourself, what are the moments you remember? They're always the anomalies. They're never the expected, the predicted, the probables that analytics, feasts off of. So first, my father grew up on 178th and Amsterdam Avenue. His father was a bookie and a rum runner who worked at the Polo Grounds, and so I come from very good stock. He was the water boy for the 1927 football Giants. Some people think other
Mhm.
important things happened in 27. Not in my family. I understand what you're saying. I understand your questions and I respect them. Um, bottom line, this is a plea to let the human flourish in baseball.
Thanks,
What a
Jane, but
wonderful way to end.
it's a completely watered down game. Completely watered down.
I understand that.
Jane, I want to thank you for your time. This is the book. I don't know if you guys can see it. Well, it's a wonderful read. I bought copies for friends. Um, I,
Please, Susanna, buy copies for friends, family.
and I'm listening to it as an ebook.
What do you think? Did I do okay?
You did okay. I'm just getting started. I read. I'm a better reader than a listener. I have to tell you,
Me too.
unless I'm listening to you in person. But thank you again for your time, Tara. Thank you for the connection here, and we wish you well. We look forward to reading whatever else you write again. And I'm going to find you at other presentations and just come listen to you some more.
There are a zillion of them. I've done so many of these now, but this is fun. Some of them aren't that much fun. This
Well,
one,
thank you.
this
We
is
really
fun.
appreciate your time. You
And
have
I
a
hate the
fantastic day
Dodgers
and
and
hope the
Yankees.
storm is not too bad. Take care.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off so I can
Get back to work.
get
Thank you.
back to work.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I
Appreciate you guys giving us a little bit of extra time with Jane. We could, if we need to, maybe run over a little bit with Ed. Ed Edmonds is our next speaker, and I think, Ed, you have a PowerPoint?
I do.
I don't know if Tony has been working with you to set that up off screen? Or
I
do
have
I
not.
need to do something, Tony? Do I need to do share?
We are gonna give him, I'm gonna set him up with host, allow him to be a presenter. So give me 1 minute. While he does that, Ed is one of the co-authors on a book on attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame, a collection of biographical essays published by McFarland this year. There's 11 chapters. And Ed's, yours is on Larry McPhail, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Excellent. So, let's see.
Hopefully this will come up as a share now.
It was interesting to me when I was reading a little bit about Ed. And many of you know that I used to be a librarian. Well, Ed has both a JD and an MLS, so he's an attorney and a librarian, and he's been the head of several law libraries over his career as well. So I felt a kinship to him when I read that. So I'm glad that you were able to join us today.
Good. And hopefully you can see my PowerPoint.
I don't see it yet.
Not yet. I do see multiple shares. So one participant, let me go ahead and do this and set you up.
Thank you, Tony, for your technical.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm working on two monitors, so give me 1 second. Okay, Ed. I'm gonna set you up with a spotlight for everybody.
Looks
Oops.
like I've got it now. Let's.
Yes. Yeah, you are good.
There we go.
Terrific.
Everybody can see that PowerPoint now.
We sure can.
Well, I'm not, I knew it would be extremely difficult to follow Jane, particularly if you're talking about lawyers, but we're going to give it a go. And you can save your lawyer jokes for the end of this. And one of the things that I want to do at the end is actually talk a little bit about the three commissioners who are in the Hall of Fame. And Mars, I may not have time today, but I can go into a lot of detail and have actually in print on baseball's antitrust exemption. So, and yes, by 1950s when it was challenged by Earl Toulson, and please, if you take away anything from this today, is don't continue to refer to him as George Toulson, the middle case of baseball's antitrust trilogies. When he challenged it in the 1950s, it should have been taken down at that point, if not sooner. But we're a little over 100 years since that started. This this particular chat today, I've tailored it particularly for the O'Doul chapter and the Dusty Baker chapter. The editors of the book, Lou Schiff and Bob Jarvis. Lou and I have already done a few of these. Lou's lining up many more. So we try to vary the presentation so that if you actually succumb to listening to something about this book more than once, you'll get different takes. So, for instance, last week I talked about Larry McPhail and his time in Nashville, and that was particularly for the Nashville chapter. So the book is a combination of chapters contributed by 11 people. And as Marlene noted, I am actually a librarian as well as a law professor. So all the chapters that were submitted in the book were written by one of the individuals with one of those two connections to their professional life. And yes, as I mentioned, we're trying to vary these, preparing them a little bit different. So, and there's a couple of Hall of Fame images from the far past in terms of the building. So, going to talk about the attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame and just quickly to go through them. Three players, Huey Jennings, Jim O'Rourke, and Monty Ward. Two managers, Miller Huggins and Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa being the only one of the 11 who is still with us. Three executives, Branch Rickey, Larry McPhail, and Walter O'Malley, and three commissioners, Landis, Chandler, and Kuhn. So what I wanted to do today is discuss a little bit about the legal education of these lawyers. What we were trying to do with the book, one of the points was to focus on their legal education and their time as an attorney and determine whether or not that was a factor at all in the contributions they made to baseball, which got them into the Hall of Fame. So I'm doing that in part because it tells you a little bit about where these individuals were from, a little bit about the education that they got. And then at the end, I picked two of the innovations Branch Rickey and the farm system and Larry McPhail and night baseball to kind of focus on, because one of the things that's a backdrop to Jane's book really is about innovations and things that over the history of the game have made it perhaps more interesting. And we could certainly debate whether the farm system or night baseball made the game more interesting or not. So this is Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And one of the things in the book is that we took great pains, particularly Bob Jarvis wanted to get a picture of each of these individuals, not in baseball clothing, but in something that you might consider to be a little bit more legal. Landis graduated from actually Union Law School, which in 1891 was connected to Northwestern University School of Law. And he was admitted to practice. He was actually admitted to practice in Indiana before he ever had any legal education. And one of the reasons he got a legal education is that he was having trouble getting clients. But in those days in Indiana, and apparently through the 1950s, you could present yourself in front of a local judge, and if somebody could vouch for your character, that was enough to be admitted into practice and becoming a lawyer. As most of you know, he's the first commissioner. He was a district court judge for 17 years, and he had, prior to that, some time in private practice. One of the things, and I had done some work on this, I didn't write the chapter on Landis, but I had always been very curious about where his legal education had come from, and indeed the fact that he himself later claimed that he attended Cincinnati's YMCA Law School. Well, one thing about Landis is he actually never went to college. He dropped out of school at the age of 14, and he couldn't have attended Cincinnati's YMCA Law School because it didn't open until 1893. But even Wikipedia claims that he attended Cincinnati's YMCA Law School. And one of the things that all the authors in this enterprise did was painstakingly go through each and every claim that was in there to determine the accuracy of it. Huey Jennings, and these will all come in order of their induction into the Hall of Fame. Went to Cornell University School of Law, attended early in the 1900s, was in practice for 15 years. And keep in mind that some of these older gentlemen who are in the Hall of Fame and were lawyers, but this was an age when most people had to do something else during the off season in order to sustain themselves. The reserve system having a lot to do with the salaries that baseball players got. But actually, Jennings is one who was, who did quite a bit of practice of law. He was secretary of the Players Protective Association, one of the first unions, and that, was a factor. Jim O'Rourke, orator Jim O'Rourke, and you see that even on that's the first two words in his Hall of Fame plaque. He got that nickname because of his elaborate, eloquent, loquacious way of talking about things. But he attended Yale Law School. And there you see that indeed he was in private practice from 1887 until 1919. And some of these individuals who are in the Hall of Fame actually went to quite well-known and important law schools here in the United States. O'Rourke has something to do with the creation of the reserve system because in 1877 he protested Arthur Sodden's requirement that the players pay for their own uniforms. And Sodden did agree to exempt O'Rourke from forking over the $30 to pay for that. And that was one of the reasons that Sodden went to the other National League owners with a plea to create the reserve system, because O'Rourke was so ticked off about the original decision of Sodden to not pay the fee that he jumped to the Providence team. John Montgomery Ward, who inspired O'Rourke to attend law school, when they spent that following year playing for the Providence Grays, and ultimately when he came back, the Giants ended up paying his tuition to go to law school. Here's Miller Huggins. You see a nice colorized image of Huggins. The one in the book is of his graduating class at the University of Cincinnati. But I went with a couple of different images for this presentation. Huggins never practiced law. And at 5'2", 120 pounds, he decided that his life's vocation or work had a lot more to do with baseball than it did with practicing law. And of course, his 6 pennants and 3 World Series championships speaks well for what he did as a manager. He did nearby here in St. Paul, nearby where I currently live, did clerk for a municipal court judge, but soon after finding out that he had actually passed the bar and had fulfilled his father's wishes that he attend law school and pass the bar, he never practiced. His father still pushed him to do something other than baseball with his legal education. And he said, you can't do 2 jobs. You're either a lawyer or you're a ball player. Can't be both. And although the others in the Hall of Fame, with a couple of exceptions that we'll talk about, did do both, Huggins felt like he couldn't. John Montgomery Ward um, was one who actually had quite a successful legal career. And that, of course, came after he injured himself as a pitcher and became, an everyday player. Obviously, most of you know about his founding of the Players League, and actually, Ward and Buck Ewing had lawsuits that they won regarding the reserve clause, but unfortunately, the league that they founded couldn't survive financially. He went to Columbia's law school, admitted to practice in New York, and spent 1895 to 1906 practicing law, and actually was a very well-known and important attorney in New York. In 1882, after he was traded and he was thinking about his future after playing baseball, he decided that he should go to law school. That's when he enrolled in Columbia, received his degree in 1885, and then organized the Brotherhood, which an early attempt to unionize baseball players. And although he had initially thought that there was some value to having a reserve system, he later changed his mind. One of the things that particularly bothered Ward about the reserve system is that when a player was sold to another team, as a player, you didn't get part of the financial amount that was involved in that sale. Goal, like so many unions, was to improve salaries and working conditions, wanted more of a say in what was going on the field. And there you see a little bit about his case. He hired a local counsel. He wasn't involved in defending that himself. And in that case, he actually won. Unfortunately, the Players League couldn't survive financially. Branch Rickey um, attended the University of Michigan's law school, graduated in 1911, practiced for a very short time. We'll talk a little bit about that out in Idaho, where my middle child lives in Boise. Invented baseball's farm system, engineered the breaking of baseball's color line. We'll talk a little bit about the farm system after I go through this brief discussion of the 11 men in the Hall of Fame. He decided at a convention with two of his fraternity brothers that they should go to Boise because it's great climate, geography, and everything. Maybe that comes from a winter or two in Ann Arbor, but they went out there, and it didn't turn out all that well for him. Um, but this is a statement by Howard Crow that indeed, if he had become a lawyer, Crow felt like he would have been recognized as a truly outstanding trial lawyer. Rickey and MacPhail, of course, have a connection, as many of you know. First, that Branch Rickey replaced Larry MacPhail when MacPhail went into the Army. MacPhail had been involved in World War I. Many of you might know the story of him supposedly trying to work with Luke Lee, who was the commander of his outfit, to try to kidnap the Kaiser and bring him out of Holland back to stand trial for war crimes. The story that goes with that is that he stole one of the Kaiser's ashtrays. It wasn't actually the Kaiser's ashtray. It was the Baron who owned the castle at which uh, the Kaiser was in exile in Holland. So another correction that we made in this book. Hopefully, people will read it and we'll get some of these truisms out there. And here's MacPhail, the gentleman that I wrote about. And I'll tell you the one thing that is truly interesting in trying to work on MacPhail is that there's almost no story about MacPhail's life that doesn't have alternate, stories. The year he was born in, the place he was born in. You go on and on. And so it took a good deal of effort, and I'll show you one of those instances to try to ferret out some of the truth. MacPhail started at Beloit College, and after a year, he transferred to the University of Michigan when he decided he wanted to go to law school. He was there for a year. Again, there was stories that he dropped out after a semester because of eye problems. That doesn't hold up to scrutiny. He did indeed spend an entire year at Michigan before transferring to George Washington. That was another interesting thing because there are printed newspaper accounts in the newspapers in Washington, D.C., that he was at Georgetown. But I was able, with some digging, to actually find him listed in the newspaper as a graduate of George Washington University. So I think we've got that kind of squared away accurately. He did not practice law for a very long period of time. He did join a law firm that had offices in Manistee, Michigan, which was fairly close to where he lived before he started his education, his college education, and then law school. We know he became a member of the Michigan Bar. We have authority on that. But while practicing and in Chicago, he helped reorganize the Rich Tool Company. And that I just recently found out, and it didn't make its way into the book, was that there might have been a little bit of an interesting connection there in that the president of the Rich Tool Company was actually his father-in-law. So I think that was one of the reasons that that became a client for MacPhail. MacPhail's life to me showed a lot of wanderlust. He never seemed happy at what he was doing for very long and seemed always to be looking forward to the next thing that he could do. And in this instance, he left the practice and the Rich Tool Company behind in Chicago, went to Nashville to run the Huddleston Cooper men's store there, helped do some very interesting things in improving the financial scenario for the store, but then left for World War One. And um, probably, as most of you know, there's a major aspect with respect to his relationship with Ricky and the question of race and the MacPhail report, which everybody thought had been buried because everybody who was in the room was told to leave their copy before they left and it'd all be destroyed. But Happy Chandler kept his copy, and thus we know some of what was in that report as to the impact of allowing African American players into the game. And Happy Chandler, as I mentioned, he's the one who kept his copy. So we have one that shows the version where they had not removed the part about race. I think there'll be. So I've read a book about Billy Williams. It's a joint biography of Williams and of Willie McCovey. And interestingly, Billy Williams gave Happy Chandler a lot of credit for um, paving the way to allowing African Americans, breaking the color barrier. But there's going to be a new book coming out by Dave Bomer about Ford Frick that's going to question a little bit the extent to which Chandler was actually in favor and helped pave the way, or actually behind the scenes was working to, potentially prevent that. He went to both Harvard Law School and the University of Kentucky. Initially, he had a seat at the University of Kentucky, decided to go to Boston. He got there and he was overwhelmed. He just felt completely out of place, and so he transferred back to the University of Kentucky. He actually did coach baseball and football at both of those schools. He helped stop the Mexican League from successfully raiding Major League Baseball players, but that case ultimately resulted in Gardella versus Chandler, and so Mars, that in the late 1940s, actually was the first attempt to change the 1922 decision about federal baseball that gave baseball's antitrust exemption. And that case at the Second Circuit actually sent the case back down to trial, saying that the precedent and the decision in federal baseball was no longer accurate. Baseball by that time was considered trade or commerce, and it certainly was involved in interstate commerce. He also created the pension plan for players, funded it through radio rights and advertisement. And then there's Bowie Kuhn. And so I wish we had kept Jane on here long enough to talk about at one of the talks that I was on, that the Halsey Hall chapter and a couple Midwestern chapters other than us were involved in, asked about who of all these commissioners she thought the best of. And I don't think any of the three lawyers who are in the Hall of Fame were amongst the people that she felt the best about, more about maybe Vincent and Giamatti than. But I particularly chose this Baseball in Chaos because, if you want my own quick opinion, Bowie Kuhn did more to get in the way of things that were important, and was on the wrong side of a whole lot of decisions regarding baseball. He went to the University of Virginia School of Law, graduated in 1950, became an attorney, and in fact, that was critical to him becoming commissioner because he worked at Wilkie Owen, Farr Gallagher and Walton, very prominent New York City law firm. And there in the 1950s was assigned to work on the case that involved Earl Toulson versus the New York Yankees. The Toulson case is actually, in my mind, a lot more important in terms of the perpetuation of baseball's antitrust exemption because it actually solidified what had happened in the federal baseball case, and that probably prompted in 1972 the U.S. Supreme Court to decide 5-3 that baseball had had this exemption for 50 years and deserved to keep it. But his work on Toulson brought him into contact with Ford Frick, with the presidents of the two leagues, and that ultimately kind of paved a way through his additional work on the Braves' move from Milwaukee to Atlanta that he did legal work on. And that, also creates this relationship with Bud Selig, another individual who will end up being a commissioner. The case went to court in Milwaukee, but ultimately the Wisconsin Supreme Court reversed it because it was a state antitrust law claim saying that no, baseball's antitrust exemption as a federal matter trumps anything that could be done by a state court. Now, when William Eckert was shown the door fairly quickly after being named commissioner in the 1960s, there was a split over whether Michael Burke or Chub Feeney should become the next commissioner. John McHale showed up as a compromise candidate, but McPhail actually, after speaking with Kuhn, decided to stay with the Expos because Kuhn convinced him that he had a moral and legal obligation to keep that job, and it paved the way for Kuhn to become a commissioner. Walter O'Malley, see a couple of images of him. He went to Fordham University School of Law, graduated in 1930, and depending upon which coast, and so since most of the people on this call are on the west coast of the United States, you might think highly of O'Malley for bringing the Dodgers. And Steve, I think I saw a wry smile there. Has done so much work on Stoneham. He encouraged Stoneham to come west with him. And so everybody on the West Coast who isn't just so nostalgic about the Pacific Coast League to stop thinking about baseball at that point in time is happy that finally Major League Baseball moved across the continent. O'Malley worked with a gentleman named Raymond Wilson. The firm did pretty well, but the two ended their partnership. But I thought this quote that shows up in the chapter on O'Malley by William Shea, who many of you know for his involvement in the era surrounding the Continental League and Branch Rickey and the Mets and Shea Stadium, said he was one lousy lawyer. Said I wouldn't have even let him plead a parking ticket for me. So that probably sums up a little bit of at least one person's interpretation of why O'Malley was probably far better off being involved in baseball than he was in the law. Uh, Tony La Russa, the one who is still with us, and he decided to go to law school largely when it became evident that even as a utility infielder, his baseball playing days were going to be numbered. And that was despite the fact he had been a bonus baby in 1963. Uh, he was admitted to practice in Florida, however, he never did, and that was in some measure because he was offered an opportunity to manage at the minor league level, and that subsequently got him noticed, and he was promoted into the managerial position that he held in Oakland and St. Louis very successfully, a little bit less so recently with the Chicago White Sox, but a four-time manager of the year. Um, and actually, this chapter is interesting because Lou spent some time talking directly to Tony and also to some individuals who were very connected to his legal education, a professor that he had. But here there was a little bit of a connection between some of what the legal education presented to Tony and how he used that as a manager. And notice that little quote there. Uh, you must pay attention to detail. You must be prepared. And that was something that the legal education presented to him. He said, "Hey, if it hadn't been for the managerial opportunities that he got, he would have gone on to be a trial lawyer." Said he would have enjoyed that because the courtroom's competitive. So that was something that, uh, but for those opportunities and the ability to display as a manager, he might be less well known to a whole lot of people outside of the state of Florida where he would have been a lawyer. So that's kind of a quick summary of the 11 uh, men who are in the Hall of Fame. And then I wanted to talk about, just elaborate, as I mentioned earlier, on two aspects of innovation in baseball. And I'm going to start with Larry McPhail, who after he came back from World War II and this attempt to hijack the Kaiser, he was not in Nashville very long after the war was over. Before, for reasons that none of us can quite figure out, he moved to Columbus, and there he became the first business manager for the team that the Reds sold to the Cardinals to become part of the Cardinals farm system. He was there in that job from 1930 to 1932. He had a falling out with Ricky. Their personalities certainly clashed dramatically. But Ricky did promote the idea that when the Reds needed a general manager, that they should hire McPhail. Some of the things that he did there to dramatically improve attendance, they built a new stadium. There's an image of Redbird Stadium, introduced $3 ladies' day tickets, organized knothole games, and then installed lights for night games and brought that innovation along. There's one of the newspaper articles talking about some of the things that he did in Columbus to help improve certainly the financial situation. And in the last of the 3 years that he was the boss, they won their International League pennant. Moved on to Cincinnati, and as many of you know, May 24th, 1935, in Crosley Field, Major League Baseball's first night game. It was prompted by a ceremonial switch to illuminate the lights at Crosley Field by President Franklin D. Roosevelt and resulted in a 2-1 Reds victory. There's image of the newspaper from the Cincinnati Enquirer the day after the game, 6 hits for each team. And there's many of you may have seen this image. It doesn't necessarily look like the type of illumination that we would like in the future. But I thought about this last week when there were some day games in the playoffs and some complaints from some players about how hard it is to see the ball in with the glare of sunlight during a certain time of the day. So that innovation, when I wrap up here soon, we could talk about whether that's been a positive or a negative for the game. The lighting design, which is at the Baseball Hall of Fame Museum, and there's Larry McPhail's plaque noting again about bringing night baseball to the major leagues and the fact that he did that as well at Ebbets Field and Yankee Stadium. Branch Rickey's farm system concept, I'm sure most everybody in this audience is well aware of that, starting in the 19 teens. And I particularly like this image of him, staring at the different list of players in different systems in the Brooklyn farm system. But there's definitely some interesting things about this. It brought him into a big rivalry with Landis, who a couple of times freed a large number of players who were in the Cardinals farm system because of Landis's feeling that that was really not in the best interest of the game. There is his plaque, and notice the very first thing on his plaque, founder of farm system. So those are a couple of innovations that I thought were worth highlighting today, because I think if you look at Jane's book, it's a juxtaposition between some of the analytics that exist in the game today and some of those things that we really feel are at the core of why the game is of interest to us and maybe so many other Americans. And in particular, one of those articles that I showed back here involves Kevin Carrane's book, Dollar Sign on the Muscle. And obviously, from anybody who's read Jane's book or watched, uh, the movies, Trouble with the Curveball, any of that, is this, discussion of scouting and what you see with your eyes compared to the analytics. And maybe a lot of us old timers feel like baseball's gone too far onto the analytics side of things and ignoring the ability to see with your own eyes whether somebody is a good player or not. So there's the three Hall of Fame commissioners, Landis, Chandler, and Kuhn. I thought we could, get to that point. I'm going to kind of wrap up and allow us to talk about if there's any questions here. This is the discount code. If you go to the McFarland website, you can get a 20% discount on the book. And I hope I've whetted your appetite to actually pick up the book. It's obviously one of those things where you can read whatever chapter in whatever order you want, as is the want of legal scholarship. I think my chapter has as many pages full of footnote information as it actually has text. That's part of the scholarly academic inclination of law publishing. But there do take a chance if you get the book to delve into some of those footnotes, because they correct some misinformation about the game, or they, if you're like me, you love to go down different rabbit holes, and you know, that'll give you the chance to do that. This discount code will be good until October 15th. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of uh, because my information will obviously be on the website, and for the University of Notre Dame or for the SABR website. So you certainly have that chance to. I'll stop the share now, and everybody can. It's actually far more interesting to people to stare at my PowerPoint, I think, than to look at my face. But as the old saying goes, I have a face made for radio. So hopefully, uh, this has been as partially entertaining as Jane's comments, but glad to answer some questions about uh, these guys, or about law and baseball, which is a lot of what my career has been about.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it. Please go ahead and raise your hand and put the questions on the chat. Mars, I see yours is up. Before we jump into the questions, I want to make a couple of announcements. First is our next joint meeting is going to be on November 15th, and we currently have 3 speakers lined up. We have Chris Haft, who's written a book, Willie McCovey, Giant Among Giants. We have Matt Seeger, who has written a book titled The God Squad, The Born Again San Francisco Giants of 1978. And we have Kevin Hurd, who wrote a book on no-hitters titled From Randy Johnson to Dallas Braden, No-Hitters Beyond the Box Score. So look for details on that. That again is about a month from now, from November 15th. Second is we are considering a cemetery tour in Sacramento, but of course it's open to anybody. We spoke with a gentleman who who volunteers with the Sacramento Historical Cemetery Society, and he has provided us with some information. So we will be relaying that. There is no date yet proposed for that, but we will sort of put it on a poll and see how many folks are interested. That one would carry a cost of about $10 per person. Next, as I mentioned, we are going to have a drawing of the winner of the door prize for the books. So first, I want to reiterate the names of the people who attended are here. First, I am going to do a drawing for Jane's. All of those folks that you listed there were present for Jane's. Then we will do a drawing for Ed's book. And I know that a few folks have dropped off. So in the interest of fairness, I will remove the names of the people who are not on the meeting right now for Ed's, to really focus on those who attended Ed's presentation. So first, I'm going to do Jane's. All righty. Looks like Bill is our winner. We'll reach out to you. And now I removed Bill from the list. You can be a double winner. So we're going to do the next one. And that is Robert. Let me just confirm. Robert, are you still on?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
I am.
Bob Komorowski's still on there.
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll be reaching out to both of you.
Thank you.
So with that, let me pass it on. Let me do a quick check on the chat. Marlene, anything on your end before we open it up for questions?
I was going to ask if folks would be interested in a tour of the Giants ballpark during the off season. I just don't know we haven't been getting big turnouts at in-person events like this, so it does require some work, and it will not, probably will not, there'll probably be a charge involved, so maybe I'll send out an email trying to gather that information. And I do want to say hello to the Lefty O'Doul's membership chair, Steve Murphy, who joined us a bit late. So always glad to see people on our calls. Also, we're thinking about what to do for Sabre Day. So I want to talk to Tony about how this hybrid event turned out. Maybe we can think about something like that. We do have some questions and comments in the chat. For you, Ed, that was interesting. There's so much I don't know. There was a comment about is Art still here?
Yes.
Moral and legal obligation.
Yeah, yeah,
I
I'm
just
here.
lost where that was.
Yeah, it had to do with John McHale and Bowie Kuhn telling him or asking him that he shouldn't become a commissioner because of the moral and legal obligation to stay with Montreal. I just wondered what that was all about, or if Bowie Kuhn was just setting himself up.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think it might have been more of the latter, Art. I think maybe he was
Pulling a Dick Cheney?
yeah, a little bit of that. I think perhaps he saw an opportunity that he could get the job and gee, what better job could you want as a lawyer to move out of than to be the commissioner of baseball? So
What could he have meant about moral and particularly legal obligation to stay with Montreal? What
yeah,
did he
just
mean?
that he felt, that was his way of trying to convince McHale that no, you really have this responsibility to the franchise, and you should, keep that obligation in mind and not take this position, but instead, um, help the one of the two Canadian teams stay in business.
Interesting. Thanks.
Steve, do you want to say anything about your comments? Steve Treader?
Sure. Hey, Ed, I just love the sort of what if speculation about what would have become of these guys if they'd gone into a legal career and not gone into baseball. And the comment that Branch Rickey would have been a terrific lawyer. And to what I've all read about Branch Rickey, that sounds exactly right. I mean, this guy was a master of argument. He could convince anybody of anything he wanted to, whether he believed it or not, he could convince you. And I love the other comment about O'Malley would have been a terrible lawyer, a great businessman, but a terrible lawyer. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. He as well was, to me, was somebody with a silver tongue. So any comments on that?
Except for whatever you want to believe about, trying to get a stadium built in Brooklyn, that maybe the, one who was even more persuasive than O'Malley was the one he was up against in trying to get the spot that he wanted in
Robert Moses.
Brooklyn. But Frank Hodak, who Steve, and is a co-author of mine and has spoken at the Nine Conference a few times, and lived within walking distance of Chavez Ravine and in the late 50s and early 60s, says, for those of us who are on the West Coast and got Major League Baseball, our view of O'Malley differs dramatically from those who are, from New York. And my quip has always been that if all the people who claim to have gone to see the Dodgers play in Ebbets Field had actually gone to see them play there, then perhaps the exodus to Los Angeles wouldn't have been there. Because I read so much about, oh yeah, my dad took me or to a game in Ebbets Field and how I love the Dodgers and all that. And I've looked at the attendance figures, and I think that people who say they've been there is, greatly exaggerated.
They got great crowds. They drew 1 million people their last few years. Not in the Polo Grounds though.
Well, the Polo Grounds, I think, a little bit more of a challenge in terms of the suitability of the facility. But some of us who now live in Minnesota, it would have been different if Stoneham had gone to the Twin Cities as opposed to going, you know, all the way across the country instead of halfway across the country.
Thanks, Ed. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning, this late afternoon. We've got more baseball ahead of us, and I hope you all enjoy the games. Uh, Again, thank you for joining us. We'll be sending out information about the November 15th meeting and other upcoming events. This has been recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch it if you want to, or let people who missed it know about this. I want to thank Tony for all of his help, and I thank you, Ed. I appreciate you joining us. And again, thanks to all of you for your support. We sure appreciate it.
Can I ask Ed a question?
Mhm. Sure.
Okay, Ed, you touched on O'Malley wanting a new ballpark, Stoneham wanting a new ballpark. They had to deal with Robert Moses, the commissioner, who had municipal and state positions. They had a lot of power. Have you read the Pulitzer Prize winning book by Robert Caro, The Power Broker?
I've only read parts of it, I must honestly say, which is also what I could say about Caro's multiple volumes, which are in my library here on LBJ. But uh, I've I've read parts of it,
Well,
and I'm obviously very familiar with the book.
so let me ask you this. Okay, I must say, when you check out the Dodgers' attendance in their last few years in Brooklyn, they were drawing 1 million people. In the Polo Grounds the last 2 years, they were only drawing about 600,000. Both neighborhoods and Yankee Stadium's neighborhoods were all falling apart. Were all decrepit. The South Bronx probably being the worst of the three neighborhoods, right? So, the Yankees actually, when the Giants and Dodgers moved to the West Coast, the Mets drew 900,000 people just for the Giants and Dodgers coming in, and the total attendance was about 1.1 million, but 900,000 is with the 11 games that the Giants came in to play in the Polo Grounds, the Mets and the Dodgers, 50,000 a game. So the question is, what do you know about what O'Malley was offered besides another site in Brooklyn, and what Stoneham was offered to stay in New York? After all, they left the biggest market in America.
Well, they did. Although, certainly Los Angeles and San Francisco were important markets, and when you think about the time frame involved and the opportunity to go into those markets, probably, there's an interesting conversation about both sides of those. I have not personally spent a lot of time specifically looking at what they were offered. Steve knows far more about Stoneham and what the Giants might have been given. But what O'Malley was looking for and what was part of the conversation, ultimately he just wasn't satisfied that that was going to greatly improve uh, the stadium situation for the Dodgers. So um, that's, Robert Moses and the certainly Kara's study of him, and anybody who has spent a lot of time in New York City and knows what Moses brought to the development, the long-term development of New York City. It's, I think the attendance figures that you're mentioning, Mars, certainly does support the fact that the Giants and the Dodgers were immensely important franchises to their fans in New York. The one sense I've gotten from what I have read of Caro's discussion of Moses is that Moses didn't have a lot of positive things in his mind about what baseball could do for the city. That was something that just was not a high priority for Moses. I see Steve nodding his head, so maybe bring Steve in on this.
Yeah, that's
I could also shed some light on this, but go ahead, Steve.
That's exactly it. It was, Moses didn't want the Dodgers or the Giants to leave, but he had a long list of priorities, and neither one of their stadiums was anything close to the top of it. Probably had the Giants and Dodgers stayed in New York, probably, a stadium would have been developed for one of them. The Flushing Meadows site probably would have been the place, but it would have taken years. And, whatever O'Malley was drawing in Brooklyn, he drew far more than that in Los Angeles. Whatever he would have gotten in New York would pale in comparison to what he got with Dodger Stadium. You can argue, and I am very sympathetic to the argument that it wasn't in the best interest of Major League Baseball as an enterprise, as an institution, to have the Giants and Dodgers leave New York. It was a terrible thing for the sport. But for O'Malley and for Stoneham as individual proprietors of their teams, they both made absolutely the right decision. And they both, even with Candlestick Park, the Giants and Dodgers came out better financially in California than they would have in New York in the 20-year time horizon, which was what mattered to them. So they both teams wanted to stay in New York, and by 1956, 57, both teams felt they just simply had no option other than to move.
You know,
I could shed some light on this.
that's actually could be a topic for another meeting. Mindful-
Absolutely.
a whole other one. I want to be mindful of people's time, and we are recording this, so I'm gonna wrap it up for now. Again, I want to thank Tony for his help. Ed, thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you in November. Take care and enjoy the rest of the postseason.
Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.